As 1904 draws to a close, Hoch commits the murder that will end his career on Tomb Snoopers. All right, so, hey, Patty.
Hello, good to be back.
Good to be back here for Tomb Snoopers again. I think this might be our last episode for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And not for too long, but I'm going overseas. I've almost gotten caught up. I thought we would get caught up enough that I wouldn't have to take any time off, but this has gone a little bit further than I expected. I graphed out the outline of how this show would go. As of right now, we're about twice as many episodes as I thought it would take to get to this point in the story, but there's a lot there, and also just a lot to talk about in Chicago in general, as we are to be doing Chicago history at a time that is going to be so critical for Chicago history right now. We've got a whole stormtrooper invasion going, and just today, Judge Ellis issued a ruling that opened with like a whole Carl Sandburg poem, The Great Defense of Our City, and then absolutely ripping on the feds.
Yeah, especially Bovino, who is obviously just...
He's like the drill sergeant from Animal House.
Oh my God!
Or the "We're not going to take it" video.
Yeah.
Or that's like he saw that guy and thought, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, and he's so
G.I. Jagoff.
G.I. Jagoff. That's absolutely a good description. Yeah. So it is interesting to be living in historic times.
Yeah, we're talking about one Chicago villain here now, but honestly, at least Johann Hoch was charming.
Well, to some people, apparently.
To some people, yeah, he at least had... I don't know. I struggle to find anything good to say about Johann Hoch.
Right?
At least he was occasionally funny. We haven't really got to the part yet where he decided he should be funny every now and then, but he got there. So you can think of some redeeming qualities to the guy. I can't really think of anything nice that I want to say about Greg Bovino right now. I don't even like his haircut.
I know, but he has a huge following. Some people do love it.
Yeah.
They love it. I mean, they really get off on this sort of mentality and cruelty. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
But we'll be talking about it for...
We'll be talking about this for
hopefully we'll be talking about his court dates.
Oh, that's what
trials.
I'd like to see. I mean, any of these guys who have been touching anybody without a warrant.
Yeah.
I mean, you touch me, your family burial plot will be mine by the time that I'm done with your ass.
Wow.
That's my promise, anyway. So, all right. But going back to another Chicago villain and another Chicago time, we've got, a lot of I find more parallels to modern Chicago history in other stories than this. Sure. Like we could talk about like Henry Rhines the slave catcher and the vigilance committees that stood up against slave catchers in those days.
Right.
Hawk is just another one where the parallels are going to be corrupt officials. We've always got that. That's kind of a constant. I don't think it's unique to Chicago by any means.
But we have our own brand.
We have our own brand. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And our own brand that just tends to advertise itself so thoroughly. But Hawk came back to Chicago in 1904 and did kind of what he always did, put an ad in the newspaper saying, "I'm looking for a wife." And this time it was seen by a woman named Bertha Sohn, whose sister, Marie, was running a candy shop in what is now the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Okay. Now, with Marie was a divorcee. So many of these people were widows. I think divorce was more common back then than people think it was, but that's not to say it was common.
Sure.
Marie had divorced her first husband, Emile. By some accounts, she had left him 18 or 19 times over the years, including a period when she lived in the States. That had been several years before, but now he had moved back to he had moved to Chicago. He was working in a bicycle shop or something, and she and her sister, Emily Fisher, decided to move to the States. Emily had about $700 in cash saved and about 10 children in Germany. She was a widow and eventually hoped to bring all of the kids over with her. But It was like taking in washing and doing boarding and, the kind of work that single women did in those days. Marie took in washing until she got a candy store. Now, one thing we know is Marie and Emily hated each other's guts.
Oh, okay.
They sailed on the same ship over from Germany, but by all accounts, they never got along. They didn't get along in the old country. Once they got here, they were living in the same neighborhood, but didn't really see each other or talk to each other. She did talk to their other sister. Marie talked to their other sister, Bertha, who would already been living here. And one thing I noticed, like reading over the trial transcripts today, is they interviewed a lot of neighbors, and one thing that you see over and over is that they knew them in the old country. So I guess it's a lot of people from the same region ended up in really the same neighborhood here in Chicago in Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
And I think that happened quite a bit.
Sure.
People would just kind of set up where their neighbors were living. Even if they weren't very close to those neighbors, it just, helped the transition, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of a hinge situation.
Yeah. So Marie moved here, and soon after moving in, she finally filed for divorce against Emile, her husband. And the divorce record survives. It's really just a lot of depositions, like how many times has he tried to kill you? He bought a pistol just for me. He tried to kill me with an inkstand. He tried to kill me with a lamp.
Wow.
Now, it's hard to know with things like this. Really, just about every divorce record you see from those days is kind of the same thing. It's a whole lot of threats to kill. And you wonder sometimes how much of it to take seriously. This is before no-fault divorce clauses. You were going to have to convince the judge that there was a really good reason you needed a divorce. So for things to be exaggerated was probably not uncommon. But in this case, the summons to Emile was sent to the Bridewell, the jail. So...
Okay.
Which lends it a certain bit of additional weight.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, by all accounts, she'd left him and unleft him and left him and unleft him. And so by early 1904, she had got herself a candy store. She was living in a boarding house over on Larrabee Street. She was living, if you want to put it in modern Chicago terms, she was living kind of by the Groupon building.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
really remarkably close to Elizabeth Girk's house, the boarding house, the wife from a couple of years ago. So
I do have a question. How do we know how many times she left and went back to Emile?
that's a good question. It was mentioned by a couple of her friends. I think it was Bertha. One of her sisters mentioned the exact number, and it definitely came up in the trial in the depositions that she gave in the divorce proceedings. How many times she had left him? It was quite a few.
Okay.
Her lawyer at the time was a guy named Isidor Plotke, who was later described as being like a German Charlie Chaplin, which is not really the description you want for your lawyer. I think somebody said it was a Charlie Chaplin demeanor and a Weber and Fields dialect. I had to look that one up. Weber and Fields were like these German dialect vaudeville comics.
Okay.
That, I guess it was a reference people would have got in the 30s when that reference was made. That's looking back at this guy like 30 years after the fact. But... It seems to be a pretty standard divorce. Just interviewed a neighbor who confirmed, he was always trying to kill Marie. I knew them back in the old country. I knew them here. Worked with him at the bicycle shop. He'd get drunk and head home and start beating people up. And so she was granted the divorce, and it was working in this candy store when her sister saw this ad saying, I'm a German middle-aged gentleman with no kids. I'm looking for someone to marry. And her sister said, "Oh, Marie, you should answer this." And Marie, I guess, was kind of like, "Oh, I don't know." Because I don't know what stood out about that particular ad. There were ads in the paper like this every week. Mm-hmm. There were whole agencies about this. Why Bertha suddenly decided, "Hey, Marie, you ought to answer this." Maybe Marie had been complaining that she didn't like the drudgery of owning her own business or anything. Or for whatever reason, wanted to get back into married life.
Sure.
She seems very eager to have done it anyway, like so quickly, like handed over the bank book and everything that not every woman did, and that she wasn't really obligated to do in this state. But so she, I think it was Bertha wrote out a reply for her and sent the message over. And a couple of days later, Johann Hoch, who is now using the name Johann Hoch again, just kind of out of nowhere, reviving one from almost a decade before, showed up and met up with Marie at the candy store, and immediately got back behind the counter and helped out with some kids who were coming in.
Oh boy!
And this is something that he always did, show how helpful he can be.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
What we do know of the meeting comes from what was overheard by her friend Bertha Nipple. It's spelled, it's nipple with a K, so maybe it's Knipple. Again, I don't know exactly how to pronounce these things or how they would have been pronouncing them at the time. Because,
Sure.
Even if however the family pronounces it now, it doesn't mean it's how they pronounced it then. But Bertha Knipple had been hanging out at the store. She went in once for an ice cream soda, then started coming in 3 or 4 times a week just to hang out. Never ordered anything else, just the one ice cream soda ever. And was still, I guess that was just became friends. I think it was probably more the point of the candy store than anything else, was just a social function. And she did mention in it, there's all these quotes that we have of Marie, and we have depositions from her, but she was pretty sure in the trial Marie did not speak a single word of English. She'd been in the States a while, she'd lived in the States previously, but was just so entrenched in these German communities. Which is very common. People who were born and raised in some of these neighborhoods didn't, only spoke Polish or only spoke English very haltingly.
All right. Well, yeah, that's the thing about, being part of a community that is transplanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Right. It happened quite a lot in those days.
Even now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why my mom didn't move to a Mexican neighborhood, because she wanted to learn English.
Really?
Yeah. She wanted to force herself. Because you could rely on that, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So, in any case, so Hawk showed up, went to the back room to talk with Marie, and apparently told her, I have this lot down on Union Avenue, I have a house that's almost paid off, I have $8,000 in cash, eventually I'm going to get another $15,000 from Germany.
Whoa.
And it specifically described himself, I am a rich man with $8,000. And that wasn't really riches, even at the time.
Okay.
Adjusted for inflation. It's probably $250,000 today.
It's pretty.
It's not. It ain't bad.
It ain't bad, I was gonna
It
say.
ain't bad. It's I hardly call him a rich man based on it, but
Right,
it was,
fair.
It was a good chunk of change to
It's
have.
on your way.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was comfortable.
Fair.
$8,000 would make you pretty comfortable at the time. Plus, he was. I can't remember if he told her he was working or what. So I don't recall anything about him working in the Pullman shops with this particular job. Okay. But at a house, and may have told her. There's a rumor that went around later that he was telling women that he was also a chemist who had some kind of preparation, some kind of study that he'd been working on to ease menopausal discomfort. That's maybe something that he was using to pay, if you got some cramps or whatever, or hot flashes,
okay.
I got cures for that sort of thing. So, because we just know this because one time later he came in and she was in the back getting dressed, and he said, "Oh, it is all right. I see women who are undressed all the time, of course." Which is as close as he ever gets, really, to making any kind of a sexual reference about any of his wives.
Right.
But he went in the back room and they talked for about half an hour, and finally what they overheard was he saying, "Well, I like you. Do you like me?" And she said, "Yes, I do, if you like me."
Oh, wow.
And he said,
Sounds like a good song.
So
what a romance.
Yeah, I like you and you like me. We can get married then, yeah. And she said, "Yeah, if everything you said is true, I guess it's all right." So about a half an hour of talking, They decided to get married, and nobody thought, "Hey, you're rushing into this," or anything. It's amazing how blasé people were about all this. "Oh, you're going to go get married to this guy. Okay."
Yeah.
So they spent a couple of days getting more acquainted and calling each other sweetheart, or... at one point, they were at another house and happened to run into Emily, Marie's estranged sister. Okay. And she initially said, "I'm not introducing the two of you. I'm not talking to her." But the woman who owned the house introduced us, said, "Mr. Hawk, this is Emily. This is Bertha's sister." And Hawk said, "I don't want any misunderstanding in the family. Why don't you shake hands and be friends?" So they made up, and after that were at least a little bit more friendly. They went out and chatted and made plans to meet up on Christmas. The next thing we know, they were married and living down in this little house on Union Avenue that is, you could stand on the porch and see the H.H. Holmes murder castle. It was that close to that old building, which was still standing at the time. They're living there. I think it was Bertha the sister came to hang out one day, and they spent most of their time bad-mouthing Emily. And that seems to be like the topic of the day. By that time, Marie was starting to feel kind of sick, but she was able to participate in the activity of the day, which is talking shit about their other sister. Really, the thing was, she's got all this money, but she left all these kids back in Germany, and Hoch was raving that she was, there was a German term, raven mother. It translates to. Okay. But by this time, again, she was starting to get sick, and Emily came over at one point with a Christmas gift, which was a picture of herself to give them. That was probably the picture that was published in the newspapers right after all of this. She looks like one of her descendants wrote to me one time said, I found that picture up in an attic. I was like, who's that old sauerkraut? Nice. Amazing. And that's what she looks like, stern old lady, frowning. She was probably about the same age I am now in the picture, really, but looks like she's a million years old. But anyway, Emily was like back and forth, apparently unaware that they were talking crap about her all the time. But Marie was starting to get sicker and sicker at this point. And then pretty soon they had brought in a nurse, a teenager named Gussie, who was in charge of administering things like enemas and douches, as directed by the doctor. And there's a lot of that. And, giving her ice milk. And Hoch had been telling everybody I was married before, but my wife was sick for 18 years. And I'm so happy that now I have a healthy wife.
Oh, boy.
And as Marie got sicker and sicker, he started saying, oh, woe is me. I thought I had a healthy wife this time, but it's just the same as it was before. But was, by all accounts, being a very attentive husband. The doctor was very impressed at what a great guy this Hoch fellow seemed to be, as his wife got sicker and sicker with what appeared to be kidney disease. She had been suffering, by all accounts, from Bright's disease and kidney disease most of her life. At one point, one of her sisters would say that she had been having it really bad lately, but she didn't want to tell her new husband because she didn't want to worry him or didn't want him to call off the whole wedding because of her health. Whether that is true or not is hard to say. But Hoch was mixing up medicines for her and mixing up enema solutions for her. And then Emily, who had never been friends with him in the past, was in charge of things like emptying the slop bucket. So all of a sudden, this woman who hadn't been speaking with her sister in years was now showing up to empty her diarrhea jar. And I get a little suspicious of this.
Yes.
I feel like there were times when Hoch would walk her back to the streetcars and tell her, if I married the wrong sister. If I had met you first, I would have been marrying you instead. That's according to Emily later on. Trying to piece together what really happened in all these encounters, I feel like Bertha Nipple is our most reliable source here, and maybe Bertha Sohn. These were the ones who didn't have anything to gain from it. Marie didn't live to tell her own story. Emily changed her story around a lot over the course of time, depending on whether she thought Hoch was ripping her off as well or not, which she went back and forth on. And she would end up being one of the more interesting characters here. Now, Marie, we don't really know that much about her personality. I mean, she was only on the stand in her divorce proceedings, and I've got stuff from that, but you don't really get much of her personality from it. We do have one of her friends said that she made no end of fun. So that's a nice thing to say. That we never picture these middle-aged German housewives and widows being fun. That just doesn't go in with it. We don't picture too many of them hanging out at music halls. We picture them scrubbing and running boarding houses and stuff, which is really, by most accounts, how many of them were spending their days. And why they were attracted to somebody like Johann Hoch, who showed up and said, hey, I've got money and I can get money for you too. So she got sicker and sicker. We also know that she had some problems with religion. She was a strong critic of the church. She refused to get married in any kind of a religious ceremony. And they did some talks about this. And Hoch, of course, find out what she wants and be that guy. There were other wives that he had said he was always breaking into psalms and always being very pious and religious. In this case, he said that he was actually a noted lecturer on anti-religion stuff. and would sit around and apparently was pretty good at talking about this stuff because he and Marie would sit there and talk about all their problems with the church. We don't really know what these were because the only witness to it was birth of the other sister who didn't give a damn about religion one way or the other. So when they were talking, she would just tune it all out. That would come up at the trial later. It's like they would talk about religion. I didn't give a damn about any of that stuff, so I just kind of sat there while they talked. So that's kind of interesting. We always also tend to think of these middle-aged German widows as being, ultra pious and religious, especially in the 19th century. We kind of assume everybody was super religious back
no
then.
doubt.
And realistically, they kind of were not. in
that
my
way.
experience.
Yeah, especially if you're ready to just like hook up after half an hour of sweet talk, but not even sweet talk, just shop talk.
Just shop talk. Really, it was all just a business plan. But after several weeks, Marie passed away, and the night before, Emily had been visiting again and was overheard being shouted at by Emily saying, "All right, you marry him when I'm dead. Go ahead, see if I care. I won't need him anymore." And what they were calling each other cows.
Wow.
You human cow, you pig, and just yelling at each other. And Emily at one point decided she was going to storm out of the place. Then she got downstairs and realized the streetcars had stopped running for the night and said, "All right, I'm going to stay on your couch for the night, then I will never cross the threshold of your door again." And the next morning, Marie was worse, so she went to get the doctor and then pronounced, was like liebt, dead.
Whoa.
Or, no, tot. Liebt, she was cold, I think.
Okay.
My German is just awful. But,
well, you got the right. You got so much information in your head.
Emily just like casually said, "Tot, she's dead."
Whoa.
So Marie was then left on the couch for a while. Hoch went out and smashed all the medicine jars, threw them against the wall of the house.
Acting as though he was angry and
yeah, and also I spent so much money on all this medicine, and also
it didn't save her life.
Yeah, and it didn't even save her, and I spent all this money on it, and also I don't want anybody going through these medicine bottles to see what was in there.
There's evidence.
Yeah. So, but while the body was still on the bed, according to what came up at the inquest and what came up at the trial, while the body was still in the bed, Hoch proposed to Emily, whose dead sister was lying there right in front of her.
So icky. All right.
And initially she said, we shouldn't even be talking about things such as this right now. This is horrible. But Hoch said, "To the dead belong the dead, to the living belong the living." And with a little bit of sweet talking, Emily agreed. So Marie was buried at Oakwood Cemetery in an unmarked grave. There was a minister present, but Hoch kind of shut him up. He didn't want any prayers or anything like that. Marie wouldn't have wanted that.
Exactly.
And the next day, Hoch and Emily went to Joliet and got married.
As you do.
As you do.
You go to Joliet, they always say.
Yeah, he always went to Hammond or Joliet or something. It was seldom just in Chicago. But with Marie, I think it actually was in Chicago.
Are we training? Are we taking a train to Joliet?
It would have been a train back then to Joliet. Okay, yeah, it wasn't. You could hire a car to take you there, but it would be a pain in the butt. So I imagine they must have taken. I imagine they must have taken the train. Then they came back to Chicago to go to Marie's bank, which was in to Emily's bank, which was in the Loop, and she pulled out her $700 and handed it over to Hoch, which she wasn't really obligated to do in this state, but she did. Marie had done the same thing, just very willingly sold the candy store, handed over the bank book.
Jeez.
And I think this is part of it. They didn't want to deal with this kind of stuff anymore.
This is why women didn't own property for a long time. They just kept handing it over, even if they didn't have to.
When Marie had owned property, but she handed it over as soon as she got married, and she wasn't obligated to. It was just kind of the custom, and she wasn't rebelling against. She was rebelling against the church, but not against all the social mores of the day, I guess.
But that he convinced so many of these women is astounding to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm more surprised, honestly, when I run across stories of guys like this who got married and couldn't get the money handed over. And also like Liz Girk a couple of wives before. It's like, no, I'm not giving you my money.
Good.
You give me your money.
Yeah.
So, there were people who were looking out for themselves a little bit better. But Marie just wasn't, and Emily at the time just wasn't. And So they got her money. The next day, Emily was visiting a place. Hoch showed up, and somebody else answered the door and said, "Okay, your sister's in there, telling your sister that you killed Marie, and now you're going to steal her money." And Emily was standing there with her arms folded. "Well, how do you look now?" And he got all indignant that he would be accused of such a thing. Went into the bathroom and shaved off his mustache, then took off.
What?
He just took off. Well, we know that he went to see this woman named Johanna Reichel that he had been off and on proposing to all the time. He went and proposed to her one more time, then took a train off for New York.
Amazing.
Leaving Emily back there bereft of her savings and with a dead sister. But this was going to be the beginning of the end for him. He had left it behind, and the newspapers would get a hold of this the very next day. So this is where the story really begins. It's really tomorrow, the day after all of this, that Hoch suddenly became a media sensation. And so we will pick this back up very soon. Yeah, we're going to pick this up in a couple of weeks.
Fine.
As I am about to go traveling, so we're going to be on hiatus for just a couple of weeks. We'll still be I'll still make sure there's stuff for everybody on the Patreon to get posted. I'll post some bonus material. I'll try to keep everything up and moving, but we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get back to part 2 of season 1, in which Johann Hoch becomes a sensation and eventually decides to become a vaudeville comic as well, thinking he did kind of plan to go on stage eventually, but he decided while he was in jail to be, if I make everybody laugh, if everybody likes me, then nobody's going to want to hang me. It was a strategy that very nearly ended up working. So we'll be back with that in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Patty, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me,
Adam. I'm Adam, and this has been Tomb Snoopers. We'll see you soon. As always, there's lots more data, including all the stuff we've talked about today, over at patreon.com/tombsnoopers, plus early access and a whole lot more.